Happy Friday, everyone. Chris Wessel here, making a quick video to address a couple conversations that popped up in some of the Facebook recruiting groups. The conversations were around selling challenges of selling retained search as opposed to contingency, which I think is a really good kind of leveling up conversation for people who are new to recruiting, but also people like myself who experienced this a little over a year ago. Contingency recruiting for 15 plus years, and about a year and a half ago made the conscious decision to gravitate towards retained. So while this isn't necessarily a guide to all things selling retained search, I just want to share with you some of what I experienced along the way. Like a lot of you, I thought about all the reasons why retained search made sense for me as a recruiter. But one of the things that became very apparent really quickly was clients don't care about that, right? There's a bunch of reasons why it's good for you. It stabilizes your cash flow. It better qualifies your job orders, deeper relationship with the client, higher likelihood to fill, less of your time wasted. Great. Spend money on committing resources. You're actually going to get paid on it, cover some of your expenses. Fantastic. All 100% true, and all 100% clients don't really care. They don't. Why should they? Right? So I started to see more success in getting retained search engagements when I consciously shifted my messaging to always have to do with what's good for the customer. And that's not necessarily, it's easier said than done, right? So if there's one thing you take away from this quick video, it's that whatever you do pitch, if you at least make sure it has to do with why this is good for them and not why it's good for you, then you're on the right track, in my opinion. Things like, hey, the client has to understand it costs money and blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. It's true. Doesn't matter. Right. So some of the things that you can position when you're talking to a company that you want to work on a retainer for or with, whatever. If they've worked with recruiters before, or contingency recruiters, it's definitely a bit easier because what you can do is you can address some of the challenges in contingency recruiting, which is that there's not a lot of commitment on either side. Right. Recruiters have to juggle a lot of different, I've done this for years, so I understand, you got to bring in 20 jobs in the hopes that you fill 3 or whatever number for your industry, right? It varies, but you get the idea. When you explain to a company that that's the dynamic in the recruiting industry, and that's one of the reasons why they don't necessarily get the service that they're always looking for, because recruiters are kind of having to gravitate towards the more fillable jobs. Their time is divided up, so they can only really give each job so much attention. Then it becomes about service delivery, and it becomes about, if I am able to commit more time to you, I can do a better job for you, right? Again, for you, that's what matters, right? So one of the things I'll cover with them is, typically, again, a recruiter, you paint that picture. A recruiter's got to take in a bunch of positions. They hit their number at whatever point and they're happy, but you've got a bunch of disappointed companies. But at the same time, those companies didn't have any skin in the game. If you were to put down a deposit, essentially, let's say I'm going to have my roof worked on, or I'm going to have a fence put up. I can, in all those situations, you're going to give that contractor some kind of a deposit, and then the rest they're going to get paid when the job gets done. I've portrayed it that way in real simple terms to customers, and they get that. But basically, it's skin in the game. If we do a contingency job order and you only pay me if I fill it, I don't owe you anything. And I'll be very candid about that. I'll explain that I don't owe you anything. We have a minimal commitment to each other. If I've taken some money from you, you bought a piece of me, right? Instead of me spending all week working on 15 different jobs and having my attention divided, and you can't do 15 things at 100%. If you have put down a retainer, then I'm focusing my time and energy on spending more time with your company to understand you better, talking to more people in your organization to really understand the role, spending more time on sourcing. Instead of sourcing on 5 different jobs, I'm sourcing on 1 or 2, right? The likelihood I can do this quickly is pretty high because I'm not going to be distracted by other job orders. I'm not rushing to beat another agency to submit, so I'm going to dot my I's and cross my T's, and we're not going to just be shoving people in front of you. Now, that said, you actually have to do all those things, right? You can't sell retainer and then do contingency. So when you tell them they're going to get more of your time, and when you tell them that you can do a deeper dive, and when you tell them that you can screen better and that you can really, give them more of a partnership, you actually have to do that, right? And it'll be apparent really quick if you do or don't. And that's going to lead to whether or not you get your next deal with them. But one of the things I do with clients, and I explain this in my pitch, if you will, that, communication is a common complaint by companies when it comes to recruiters. They don't hear from us that often, right? And that's probably because you're working on 20 jobs at once, and you might forget to even touch base with a client for a week or two until you have something for them. And a lot of times recruiters are afraid to even call their client unless they have a candidate for them. But what I do, and a lot of retained search recruiters do, is I do weekly updates where I go through, and I don't have to give them a ton of detail, but we paint a picture for them about the things that are happening. And it's a back and forth conversation. We started sourcing in this direction. We started talking to these types of people. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's a couple of examples of people. The money's a little high. I know we're trying to stay within a certain range. What should we adjust? Here's the types of companies I'm targeting. Is this where I should be looking? Do you have other suggestions? Am I headed down the right path? That back and forth communication has to happen regularly, right? So that's part of what you propose to them that's different than your typical contingency recruiter experience they've had, but you actually have to do it, which is super important. Again, don't sell retained and then execute on contingency. You're probably more likely to get this with an existing client or a company that maybe you've done some work with, or maybe a referral from an existing client, because yes, it is difficult with a new relationship to ask them for a retainer. You may need to do like a contingency search for them, decide if it's worth doing. But yeah, I'm not going to say you can just go out and sell this to everybody. It's going to be a lot easier if you've been doing contingency search and then you approach your clients and say, listen, we've had some successes together. This is great. I really want to focus my attention on just a few clients like you and do better work for you. And here's how we can do it, right? Again, this is all about them, and this is all about, they hear that kind of messaging from a service provider, they're going to like that, right? It's going to benefit you. All the reasons why it works for the recruiter, 100% true. But again, I can give you better service. I'm only going to focus on a handful of clients. You're going to be one of them. You're always going to be a priority because you're paying to be one. In terms of how to structure the deals, there's a million ways to skin a cat. That's a whole other conversation. But again, I guess the gist of this is, if you're trying to overcome any resistance to a retained search arrangement, think first about how you're pitching it and make sure it's focused entirely on why it benefits them and not why it benefits you. Talk to them about kind of the nature of contingency. Not that contingency is a bad thing, but just why certain things happen the way they do in contingency and why they don't happen that way in retained. And last but not least, I don't call it retained search, because retained, it makes them think about the retainer. Then it kind of comes back to you again. I call them search engagements. I call them search projects, that kind of thing. But that's a stylistic choice. So I'm looking at my little outline to make sure I didn't miss anything. Other thing I do is when I'm pitching it, I explain to them that, number one, I don't have to be exclusive with you for everything. You can give me this role, and you can work with other recruiters on other things. I have plenty of clients where they work with recruiters for other things, but you're giving me this job and this job only. That does limit their risk. You're not asking for all of their jobs. You're going to earn that, right? You may not want all of their jobs, quite frankly. I also give them a 6-month guarantee instead of a 3-month. I'm basically saying I'm standing behind my product because I believe I'm delivering a better service for you, so I will guarantee it longer. That, I think, also resonates with clients, or at least that's been my experience. That's pretty much it. That is majority of what I wanted to cover, because I wanted to keep this under 10 minutes. There'll probably be all sorts of discussion about it. I'll try to participate in what I can, but I also have work to do. So hopefully this has been of some value to those of you who are trying to make that transition. It's not easy. Stick to customers that you know, customers that you've worked with before and shown some success with. Show them the path to a better service model. And again, make it all about them and not about you. So thanks. Have a good Friday afternoon. And I actually managed to keep it under 10 minutes. Happy Friday.